All right, guys, we are live. Welcome, everybody, to the Untold History Channel. My name is Ron Partain, and we have a very awesome treat today. This is the all-military veteran perspective and mindset on what's happening today and kind of preparing our mindset for what's coming. And I have assembled a kind of an all-star cast here of people who I believe have a lot of just history and mindset and just good things to contribute to this conversation. So I'm going to go ahead and go just across the board of what I have on my screen. So Colonel Towner, I'm going to let you start.
My name is Colonel Towner-Watkins. I spent 30 years in the United States Air Force and lived all over the world, had assignments both here in the United States and overseas, also deployed several times and served some time at the Pentagon. And I was also...
Whoop.
I know. Hold on. Turn that volume off. Also was at CENTCOM on 9/11, watched that fiasco unfold. So I'm happy to be here, looking forward to hearing what everybody has to say.
Lieutenant Commander Murray.
Lieutenant Colonel Stephen Murray, retired information operations officer. My last command was a cyber defense battalion. I supported NSA as well as the Army CERT and 1st Information Operations Command. Did that for 23 years, and then I got smart and got out, and now I do as a civilian.
Forgive me. I have Lieutenant Commander on my brain, and I apologize.
It's a Navy thing. We won't hold it against you.
I'm so sorry. I just realized I was like, oh my God, what have I been doing? So forgive me for that. I will I beg your forgiveness humbly. Mr. Bennett.
Scott Bennett, Direct Commission Officer, Psychological Operations, 11th Psychological Operations Battalion, SOCOM, CENTCOM, State Department Coordinator for Counterterrorism, Ambassador Del Daly, been to Iran, been to Russia, been to all sorts of colorful places, and looking forward to participating in a colorful discussion and creating some solutions where we see nothing but problems.
Indeed. Mr. Cunningham, it's on you, sir.
Wow, I'm the junior man here, 7 years, U.S. Air Force, instructor pilot, flew Learjets, flew KC-135s, spent some time in Desert Shield and Desert Storm with like 38 combat missions. Got to have a little bit of encounter with General Schwarzkopf during those days of Desert Shield and Storm, and got out and went the civilian track after that, and honored to be with an esteemed panel.
And looks like we got Ghost back. Ghost, you're on mute right now, brother. You want to kind of give us your a quick little rundown on your bona fides?
Former Air Force. Got out about 6.5 years on active duty, and then went into a different world, and that's where I consult to this day, off and on. And
Gotcha.
I think most of the people who know I have heard my voice, they can pretty much figure it out. And how's the audio on this one?
A little better. Still a little scratchy, but it's an upgrade from what it was. So, and my name is Ron Partain. I was United States Navy. Served on, I was a weather observer, served on the USS New Jersey, and finished my my tour on the USS Peleliu and then got out right after the drawdown of Desert Storm. So, but I had the pleasure of being on the last crew of the USS New Jersey, which was a lot of fun. Very, very, very prestigious duty, So, but enjoyed that immensely. Do not regret my time in the military at all. In fact, I think it was probably the best decision I ever made. So, and it gives me the ability to, be a veteran and be, the camaraderie that have with people like you, five. It's just it's something that I cherish. I enjoy being around military people. It just I don't know, something about it. I enjoy it immensely. So, and we all have I feel like we have a better understanding of things around the world than other people because we've seen things that other people haven't. So, but I digress. So, there's a lot of shit going on in the world today. Today isn't the solar eclipse today?
It is. It's over Cleveland, Ohio right now.
Yeah. And I think, me personally, I think that's going to be basically a big nothing burger. What say you guys?
I agree.
Yeah, I'd have to agree too.
Well, it's a distraction. It's a distraction for the idiots and the simpletons and those whose brains are being eaten away with mad cow disease, otherwise known as the COVID-19 vaccine. These simple retards that worship their stomach and adore football games. It's something to them, but they have their reward.
I would agree. It was simply, let's call it fear porn. I think somebody's doing some, let's say, in-depth experimentation with this kind of thing, with all that they put out. Why school closings? Makes no sense.
That's a good point. They're going to be tracking the responses and the chatter for behavioral psychographic points.
And
Well,
that's what I think it is predominantly.
I think you could make the case for two different things. I think Ghost, you're right on the first count. On the second count, when you look at all the guard that's been activated and the extra police presence, it's an opportunity for the elite / whatever you want to call them in DC to normalize a heavier presence of police and National Guard in lieu of martial law. That would be that's how I see it.
I agree. Steve,
Ron, let me, if you don't mind, I
go
want
ahead.
to give you a synopsis that I think at least has merit enough for us to consider when we bring in, again, from every angle, psychological, military, political, sociopathic, biblical. Let's bring in all of these perspectives. We know for a fact something is happening, and there's a reaction to whatever that is that's happening. Okay, we don't know who the instigator is and who the counterparty is, but we do know that the system has been activated. So let me read this in context, and maybe we can talk about it. It says, here's a review. NASA is trying to fire rockets at the Large Hadron Collider to disrupt a process. The White Hats, so they say, are using gravitational wave emitting satellites to create a wormhole. Who knows? PSYOP? I don't know. NASA will fire rockets at the Large Hadron Collider on April the 8th. The White Hats have a multifaceted plan to prevent NASA from interfering with the Large Hadron Collider on the 8th. The White Hats have set up a series of magnetic resonance pulse generators around the Large Hadron Collider. They've deployed several high-powered lasers around the Large Hadron Collider. The White Hats have hacked into the control software of the Large Hadron Collider, and the White Hats have covert teams in the area of the Large Hadron Collider. Now, say what you will about CERN, say what you will about NASA, say what you will about the Large Hadron Collider. say what you will about science. Are we there?
Yeah.
Okay, I don't know. So my screen went away. Here we go. There's something to be said about some kind of this is a distraction. 15 states don't deploy the National Guard, tell people to get 2 weeks of water, tell people to get all their medications in order, have a calm plan, and extra staff their hospitals because of a damn solar eclipse. Okay. You don't do that. It's never happened before. So the question that I have is, what's the story behind the story? It's a nothing burger for us right now, but it seems to me as if there's a lot more going on behind the scenes than we're maybe aware of.
I agree. My feeling is that this was going to be an event where, very similar to maybe Y2K, this is going to be a thing where they're going to monitor the reactions, kind of like a test run to see who does what, and hey, how far can we push this to, and just to see the reactions that people have. That was my view on this, really from the get go.
But isn't that a 24/7 thing? They do that all the time, every day, no matter what's going on, whether it's our reaction to the Super Bowl, a tornado, or an eclipse. They're monitoring and tracking and evaluating everything all the time. I don't know that this is necessarily an either or thing. This is an and all the above thing, in my opinion.
Possibly. Go ahead.
No, I was just going to say, put it in context in the framework of what else is going on around the world. There's a lot of other stuff that's more important than an eclipse that's happening. There's Netanyahu and his genocide of the Palestinian people, and his thumbing his middle finger at the child molesting retard Joe Biden, and the killing of aid workers, besides the 35,000 killing of Palestinians, children and women, in this demonic rage that I can't imagine how anybody can call themselves a human being and be on the side of Israel killing these people. I mean, nobody remembers October 7th. Nobody even remembers the Holocaust of World War II. And Ron and you and I already know the Europa dimensions of that. I won't go into that whole discussion, but for the average simpleton, World War II Holocaust, nobody cares about that anymore. Oh, Auschwitz and all that, who gives a shit? Look at what you're doing to the Palestinians, Rabbi Silverstein or Shmuley or any of these other people. So the Israeli operation is about to blow up, especially with their destruction of the Iranian consulate in Syria. That's a smart move. Do you think Americans are going to throw on the doughboy military outfit and run to the sound of the Light Brigade and serve in a draft against Iran, Syria, Iraq, Turkey, and every other Muslim nation for Israel over this? I don't think so. And what's happening in Ukraine? Zelensky's trying to blow up a nuclear power plant again. I know this because I was just on RT yesterday and we're talking about it. So you have the potential of NATO and Mossad and CIA and MI6 and everybody else trying to blow up a nuclear power plant in Iran, in Ukraine. You have Russia closing in on the murderers, the half-wit retard jihadists that don't even know what jihad's all about, who killed a bunch of women and children and old people going to a boys band concert in the Crocus Theater. Russia's about to tie that around Kirby's neck and hang him. Incidentally, when I was in Russia, the State Department memo that listed the dangers of attacks, I read from the State Department bulletin board outside the U.S. Embassy. I've got video to prove it. So that exact memo, that exact language was sent to the Russians about a few weeks ago. It was out in the open under the snow in November of 2023. I was there. So the Ukrainian situation, the Israeli situation, the Iranian situation, never mind the southern border invasion, where every third world banana republic knuckle dragging rapist, drug addict, and idiot is looking to rape and pillage America like a bunch of blacks at a Target store. That's coming. So with all of that as background theater music, this constellation thing of a comet, what is that? Is that gonna set in motion things or trigger things, or is that a distraction? So we're looking over here while some other serious problems are buried as time bombs waiting to go off over in Ukraine and Israel and Iran and Russia. I think that's really what we need to focus on, are attacking those problems, extinguishing those problems with the fire hoses of truth. And Steve Murray will agree with me. Truth is the strongest weapon in psychological warfare. Nothing can compare and nothing can defend against truth. So that's what we need to do.
Yes.
I have to say something here. I'm just new to all of these people, but if we can't make our point without disparaging people, I don't want to be a part of this forum.
What's disparaging, Colonel?
You just talked about Black people in Walmart as if you're trying to stereotype people. I don't do that.
I'm drawing attention to a phenomenon that occurred.
To do that.
I'm drawing attention to a phenomenon that occurred in which you had hordes of Blacks going into a Target store and rummaging and emptying it. I'm not attacking Black people. I'm simply addressing a phenomenon. Now, if you're missing that, I'm sorry. I'll try and speak slower and explain it. But I'm not attacking Black people.
You just called everybody that doesn't know history names as well at the beginning of your dialogue here.
I beg your pardon,
Americans have been lied to for decades.
Yeah.
They're not ignorant on their own.
Not all of them.
Not most of them. But again, we can make our point
statement
without disparaging our fellow Americans.
Well, I don't think there's disparaging when you're identifying things in a kind of a rustic way. I don't pull my punches, and nor am I interested in political correctness or feminine sensitivity. So, I'll speak as I want to speak, and you speak as you want to speak, and Rob will speak as he wants to speak, and Stephen will speak as he wants to speak. You go ahead and take the floor.
I don't have feminine sensitivities. I have sensitivities
I'm
to
not
my
talking
fellow
about
Americans
it.
who are here for the truth. We are here for the truth. It has nothing to do with my sex. And how dare you even imply that it does?
I'm not talking about you. I'm talking about general cultural phenomenon.
Oh, I don't. Sorry about that. I don't know what happened there.
Ron, if I spoke out of turn, you're more than welcome to delete me from the conversation and invite this woman back. But I don't think I said anything.
No, I think there was I think there was some misunderstanding. It's there's just misunderstanding there. So
let me just add, if I might, I don't think there was misunderstanding. I think she perfectly understood, and I think she's on the opposite side of the position that I was presenting, and that's why it caused and triggered such I don't know how to coin that reaction, but I'll let the audience. Let me just end it here because I don't want to dominate the conversation. But when I go into a conversation, when I go in to present the truth, it's to present for the people in the stands watching, like Wimbledon, who is having a discussion and who has the most truth about a subject matter. Am I salty? Am I Dennis Miller and some of my comical observations? Sure. But what has happened to our society where we don't have a sense of humor anymore? What has happened to our society when we can't say a bunch of Blacks go into a Target store? Are they going to be reading Shakespeare or are they going to be looting it? I'm not saying all Blacks. I'm simply saying we've had episodes where cameras and news shows show Target stores. I know Nordstrom's here in California. We had a whole crew of Blacks come in from Oakland, San Francisco, and rampage the whole place. I'm not saying all Blacks do that, but it's a phenomenon people are pretty much aware of. I could have said Black Lives Matter as they go into restaurants and sit down where people are eating or push them out or do other things. I'm not trying to win anyone's political caresses like a cat purring. I'm simply presenting the truth in a raw, direct way, and it's for the audience. for them
Well,
to kind of get. Now, if you react emotionally, that tells me everything about, the person who does that. But I'll end it
well,
there and hand it to you. I'm welcome to
the
criticism.
miscommunication I think was when you talked about women's and sensitivities, and I think she took that as a personal attack, and I don't believe that you were talking about her specifically.
No,
So
of course not. But
yeah,
it tells us the type of personality that is so narcissistic and so egotistical that some sort of a commentary on sociological behavioral patterns is somehow a personal attack upon them. It's not. We have a masculine crisis in this country that has developed because of an oversensitized feminine, get in touch with your feelings, toxic masculinity, and all that bullshit we've talked about.
right.
Am I missing something? Or is that just a convenient thing that perhaps she likes and she wants
No,
and
actually,
she doesn't have a problem with, because perhaps she's accelerated on the military board of rank through using those currents to push her around?
I'll say this. I've had some in-depth conversations with her, and she's probably she's probably more male than most males in the military. So yeah, she's very, very tomboyish, and she
Well,
thinks
she walked off the battlefield. She walked
yeah.
off the battlefield, taking her ball and her bat in her mitt.
Okay.
That's a
Well, this is-
silly.
Hey, gents, can I redirect a bit? Because I
Yeah.
want to go back to something that Scott said first off that I think bears mentioning, and visceral response aside, the system is flooded right now, and every medium is flooded with a variety of information that I think is designed to confuse people. You were talking about earlier that there's a number of lines of operation that are occurring all at the same time, that they want to judge public reaction, they want to judge response by the public, and they want to judge preparedness. I think it's all of the above. I think there's several lines of operation that are converging right now that are all reaching a culmination point, right? Because the one thing that we don't ever discuss when we talk about the situation in a broader context is the enemy gets a vote in everything we do and everything they do. And the vote that we're not paying attention to right now, which I think is very salient to this conversation, at least when we started, is we're seeing all of their attempts to escalate the war in the Middle East, all of their attempts to escalate the war and have a direct confrontation with Russia. That's not going to end, because look, the bigger picture, especially in the Middle East, is the Israelis need a wider war. The Iranians need a wider war. They're losing public support at home, and the Iranian regime for a very, very long time has tried to goad the Americans and the Europeans and NATO into some kind of a conflict, right? It benefits both sides of the house. There's no coincidence that all this is occurring as we get closer and closer to the election. And all of this is happening with the same flood of information here, right? I think the eclipse is absolutely a nothing burger. I think it's the follow-on days after this where we will see activity. What that activity is, I don't know, and I really don't care. It's kind of like, Rob, you were talking about tribunals and everything else. Until I see it, I'm not going to worry about it, because I'm worried about the close fight. And the close fight is you have a mountain of Americans that have zero clue what's going on, blissfully unaware of what's going on. And they're doing yeoman's work to try and normalize everything that's occurring around them. At the same time, all that's going on, the economy's eroding under their feet. The cost of living has priced people out of the market. The cost of housing is unaffordable for anybody under the age of 30. You have all these different factors, right? All these lines of operation are not coincidental. This was a plan for a very, very long time. So I think the piece that we're going to see, especially in the next few weeks, is some kind of an rented lips escalation here in the U.S. that could resemble something like October 7th, or could resemble something like 9/11. Who knows? They're going to make it look like it's a terrorist act, but I do not think it's a terrorist act. Because what's the one thing we're not talking about? We're not talking about China. No one's talking about China. And we're seeing what, 12 to 15,000 Chinese military age males walking across the border every single month. That's not a coincidence. So I think you're right about the distraction. And I think you're right about the lines of operation all starting to converge. And I think this distraction is just to see who is paying attention, because they're not just watching social media. They're watching phone calls, they're watching emails, all of this through AI. So they're able to see what the public's saying back and forth. That's my 2 cents anyway.
Yeah, Colonel Murray, I would say that, they both sides are able to see everything that's being said back and forth, every move and counter move. I don't believe that we are, it's not a one directional communications channel. We're not the good guys, if you will, aren't fighting with one hand tied behind their back. Who's control? I don't know. Are we in a spiritual war, kinetic war, financial war, cultural war, media war? We're in a narrative war. At the end of the day, every single question, every belief, every alliance, all of our trust that's been misplaced and been twisted and abused is coming under re-examination by everyone. I do believe that at the end of the day, I think I have a better understanding sometimes in my head. I straighten it out of my head when I look at the world that is controlled by the central bankers versus the non-central banker world. When you divide it that way instead of by NATO, which to me is just a war hawk machine for profit. It's a captured agency. I know it started well, but what it's turned into is something quite different than, a bunch of independent nations interested in their own sovereign defense. It's interested in, all wars are bankers' wars, and how do we keep the defense contractors fat and with cash? You go looking for seashells, you're going to find seashells. You go looking for war, you're going to find a war or a reason for a war. So the question is, to me, when we follow the money and we look at the alliances and you go back and you look at the 55 or 60 skirmishes that America has been involved in the last 60 or 70 years, about 80 or 90% of all the skirmishes have taken place in geographic regions where there is no central bank footprint. You have to ask yourself why. Gaddafi, Saddam Hussein, don't be selling anything. Don't challenge our cherished U.S. dollar. That's the world reserve currency. You try to start up a new form of commerce, a new form of gold-backed oil trade, your own independent, whatever. You challenge our monopoly. Here come the bombs, and here come the tanks, and here come the boys. And that kind of alignment, I think, is what's at risk with the economy collapsing, the de-dollarization, the central bank trying to maintain its monopoly, the absolute fear over gold and silver and cryptocurrency and distributed ledger technology. I mean, we stand today right now with the BRICS nations at about $45 trillion in estimated value, if you will, all in, which is about $10 trillion more than the G7 nations. And we got 45 more nations banging on the door to join the BRICS because they want to get out of this dollar matrix. So to me, following the money is following the power, is finding the motive, is figuring out who's doing what and why and how for what purpose. And it's all about control.
Oh, absolutely. And I think the pathway for us to disrupt their operations is to out all their plans as much as possible and all those relationships. I agree with that. And I think that's part of the reason why we're seeing so much pivot and so much movement on the other side is the fact that we disrupted a lot of their lines of operation just through alternative media.
Yes. That narrative war, that element of the narrative war. Think about it. What we're able to do here right now on Rumble and even on X, this has been maybe 12 months in our lifetime that we can click 2 buttons and 375 people from 22 countries can be talking freely and sharing information. It hasn't been very long. We still can't do it on Google and YouTube and Facebook and Instagram and name your other social media platform. We have one platform that's allowing us to begin to put the pieces together, and it is disrupting them like they've lost the narrative. For the most part, almost all the other channels mute. We wouldn't get 3 minutes into this conversation before we were done.
Yeah, I
Right?
agree with that. I agree
Amen.
with that.
Right.
We took the cultural narrative in 2021 and we haven't given it back. And you can see that in everything they're trying to do, especially when you watch them try to regain and rebuild credibility in the mainstream, which nobody's buying into, just like nobody's buying into the new narrative around all the vaccines they're coming out with, or the fact that they're trying to inject, different things into the food supply. Nobody buys it anymore. And as fast as they can push out the narratives, I mean, I will tell you this. I've been doing the information warfare thing for a very, very long time, and I have never seen the intensity or the widespread coverage of influencing operations that I see right now. It's in everything. It's pervasive in everything.
It is.
What's amazing to me is the amount of dark, satanic overtones in everything you watch, everything you hear, and everything you see.
There's something very important, what Murray was just saying, and that is the overtones, the undertones, the embedded demonism, all that stuff. That's essential to really understand what rational person could be behind. And again, we need to get salty with the truth. Otherwise, the desensitized people, the dull, dimming people that you want to snap up. How many of us had drill sergeants? You think drill sergeants were waiting for us to kind of wake up, or did they kick us in the ass and get us rocking and rolling? They didn't work on our timetable. We worked on theirs. Drill sergeants, everybody's had them. That toughness, that rigor is what we need to get back to as a country. Who leads it? We do, because we've been through it. We lead by example. Now, the spiritual darkness that's happening, it's all absolutely right. The spiritual undertones and stuff is sick. But I also want to just draw attention. We all know this too from our days serving. Esprit de corps. You do not let demoralization into your ranks. You don't let demoralization or interfighting or things like that into your ranks if you want to succeed as a unit, as a team. So we need to be very alert to that and discriminatory to that. We may not agree on everything. For example, I don't agree with the claims that Iran is going to be blowing up or doing anything along the southern border. I just don't see that. I've been there twice. I know their people. I know their political figures. I've spoke at conferences. It's not part of who they are. They may do stuff to Israel and Israel stuff to them. That's a different sandbox. But in the United States, I don't see that. They want long-term positive relationships with the United States. Jews have their own seats in parliaments in Iran. Christians, when I was there in 2018 and again in 2023, they're welcome. There's not as much of a hostility as the Jewish Zionist media tries to portray. But we need to be careful and always watch. We can always different opinions, but we have to watch for those who try and infiltrate, who try to disrupt, try to scuttle, try to turn us against each other, try to introduce things that we personally find abhorrent and corrosive and destructive. And I'll simply end it by saying, I find abhorrent, corrosive, and destructive this turning away from masculine, manly leadership and strength of character and things that we've seen from the quiet man to all the way back to the beginning of time. the Spartan. We all in the military, strength was glorified, efficiency, military character. The Spartans, you studied all the great campaigns and leaders, and from the Romans to elsewhere. We need to be sensitive to that, because we're at a time where there's enemies all around that are trying to take us apart and sow division. And this little example that I saw earlier, you don't behave like that, and you don't walk off and run off. Otherwise, don't come back to me, because I don't trust you anymore. You're either an infantile child or not smart enough, or you're on a pay. Someone's paying you to be disruptive. So look at January 6th, for God's sake. What they did in January 6th, that was all a setup. And it was people coming in, infiltrating. So look at the Proud Boys. I met a guy the other day who used to be part of them, no longer, because they were infiltrated. So we have to be aware of that, but we can never shape how we lead by what the bad guys or the agents of bad guys, whether they know it or not, are going to say. We don't pull our punches. We say the truth, and we have to have the strength and the intelligence and the articulation to be able to explain it, but in a Partain sort of way. We're not grocery clerks. We're not here to win friends and influence people. Military guys, the reason we like being with other military guys, there's directness, there's firmness, there's fearlessness, and there's also a jocular team spirit, like you're on the field. That's important. That's why people like and follow military leaders. So we're being called, gentlemen, to a time where our deep experiences, I don't care if you're 65, 70, 75, or 25 or 30, we are all going to be called up, not by someone else on this earth necessarily, but by God himself, to stand up and defend our towns, our streets, our courts, our counties, and to raise up teams to observe and to serve, and to make sure we don't have trucks of bad guys running through our towns, as Ron and I have talked about before, shooting saws in the air and throwing grenades out the side of the truck just to cause trauma, just to cause disorientation and fear in the woke American, soft, doughy population. So we're entering a time where all of this south of the border stuff, invasion, I do think you are going to see a lot of events starting to pop, and a lot of violence. And I have been contemplating and talking with others about a plan how to deal with that I think is the most effective plan that nobody else has come up with. But I just want to emphasize, we need to stick to our raw manhood as warriors and leaders. And that doesn't mean being rude. And trust me, no one's more diplomatic when you need to be than me. But on some occasions, with some individuals on certain topics, I think directness and sandpaper grittiness is what is needed. But I'll hand it back to you, Ron.
Well, I wanted to have Steve go through. I've been binge watching a lot of the stuff that you've been doing there, Mr. Murray. It's phenomenal. You have really kind of given me just shaken me up and given me a completely new perspective on the world. The content that you've been putting out with your sit reps and your Wednesday evening roundtables is probably, in my humble opinion, it's top notch, one of the top 5 shows out there on Rumble. And you recently you were talking about what the military's been doing, and I think you were doing it on Pop Show, about how they've deliberately are trying to kind of reduce the ranks and force the draft. And I don't want to take too much. I don't want to say too much because I want you to tell the story the way you did it. Because I don't know if a lot of the guys here have heard that story or whatnot. But I think you know what I'm talking about, and I'd love to hear you kind of go through that real quick.
Yeah, I think you're talking about grunt speak, where we talked about
Yep.
the military. Well, I'm not going to say the military, but DoD in general is working aggressively to legally justify a draft. Is how most of us see it. And let me go back to 2008 because that's where this really started. A lot of people, I'm sure a lot of your listeners will identify with the fact that Obama is the true Manchurian candidate. He was brought in to foster the destruction of the military, and he started in 2008, literally almost the day he started in office. He started going through the general officer ranks and replacing the general officers with people that were socialist communists. Because if you look at the cadre of officers in the general officer corps, there's only three general officers right now that are even in the public space talking about what's going on. Tom McInerney, Paul Vallely, and Mike Flynn. Those are the only three general officers that are out front that I know of that are consistently talking about the situation. I could be wrong, Scott, but just hold your thought.
McGregor.
Yeah. Oh yeah,
McGregor.
Well, Doug McGregor's he's not a GO, he's a colonel. So, but
Okay.
yeah, he's the other one, right? And he's done yeoman's work outlining the diplomatic side of the house. But Obama replaced a lot of the general officers with openly gay, openly anti-American. And in my case, I can use my history as an example. I was surprised I even got promoted when I did, because the 2-star I was working for was openly gay and openly promoted people around her that were gay, and promoted a environment and a culture of favoritism and disparage good order and discipline. And now fast forward to where we are now, and you have officers that are openly trying to destroy readiness. They've refactored training. They've done away with good order and discipline in the military. And they used COVID. A lot of people think COVID was about the vaccines. It was not. It was about building the infrastructure so they could implement the social scoring system. And the vaccine was a tool to get rid of anybody in the military that was favorable or loyal to the Constitution. And they were highly effective at it, highly effective. And now they're going through the motions so they can say, we've done everything to recall the IRR, the inactive ready reserve. We've done everything to recall the reservists that have recently separated retirees. We need a draft because we just can't make the numbers. That's literally where they're going. And this coincidence of all of these military age males being imported in the country, the elite need an army that's not loyal to the Constitution. So they want, and they are actively pursuing, lowering the standards to bring in all these military age males so that they can, let's just say, flood the ranks with foreign nationals. And they're going to do it this year, probably by September. They've already sent out orders bringing people back up to 10 years past separation from the IRR, and people are getting orders. I saw a set over the weekend. They're actively trying to not just destroy, but the other part of this too that I think bears mentioning is, it's no coincidence that they've gone through the strategic reserve of all of our equipment and sent it to Ukraine. It's no coincidence that they've sent all of our operational equipment and stolen from operational units to support the situation in Ukraine. Once we move that equipment overseas, it doesn't come back, it stays there. So we don't have the strategic reserve right now or the logistical capability to be able to sustain a long-term fight anywhere in the world. We're asking other countries to produce artillery shells for us right now because we don't have the capacity to do it here. So they've created the perfect storm, and it's all on purpose so they can have a foreign army on our shores and general officers that are favorable to that. And literally they're building that right in front of us. That was the gist of my point. That's the Reader Digest version of it, at least.
Do you know how to stop that?
Oh, I have a solution for it.
Let me hear yours first.
Mine is, well, first things first. And I'm just going to say this openly. the folks that are at the Pentagon had better hope that I don't become the SecDef, because I'm going to walk through the halls with a 45 and
Yes.
literally, because we're in a, this is the other piece that people don't realize. We're in a state of war right now. This is not a state of emergency. This is a state of war that's been declared by our own government against our own citizenry. And, I say on my show all the time, what's your line in the sand? What's your red line? What is the one thing that they're going to take away from you that is going to tip you over the point where you no longer care about getting in trouble or losing your life, because the cost of doing that is less than adhering to the rules that they put in place? That's the question people have to ask. And I've said for a very, very long time that until people are very uncomfortable, they are not going to get to the place where that tipping point happens. And I think we're right on the cusp of that right now.
I agree with that.
I agree.
Yeah, there's a lot of people. People are becoming more and more uncomfortable every day, and we are. And as I see it, we are one event away from. You talked about shots being fired, going kinetic. I don't know when that happens. I don't know how that happens. I don't know what that's going to look like, but. It's it'll be like the Rodney King riots on steroids.
Ron, it's going to look like, and I'm not trying to beat up on this woman. I've never known her before or heard of her, but let me just say, in my opinion, it's going to look like people like that woman jumping in front when things start to go bad, when things start to get shot, when people start getting beaten up or carjacked, which could happen after the fall of the U.S. dollar, which is seemingly is being mobilized. If and when things start to pop, whenever they are, it's going to be people like that jumping in the middle, saying, "Stop! Stop! Stop! Don't disparage! Don't say that. That's rude. That's toxic masculinity," or whatever words they want to say. You can't do. We need to come together. We need to have a discussion. They get in the middle, and they're all about false diplomacy, peace, when there is no peace.
Well,
You just said, and if anybody wants to jump in, please do. But getting in the way and obstructing the kinetic defenses that are required, and the only thing that will meet a kinetic attack is a kinetic defense. What are you going to do? Go and serve tea and offer the rainbow flag book of rules, saying this is what transgender liberation is all about, or climate change, or pick your ideology, to the Chinese military men or Mexican military men or Haitian military men or Central American or whatever they are coming across the border? Are you're going to go down and argue with them or persuade them? Are they just going to put a bayonet through your throat or a bullet in your head and say, we're going to take your house? I mean, we're coming to that level, and anyone who doesn't think we are, please enlighten me how you're getting to that position, because my calculation leads me to think we are inevitably on that route, which means we need to have a kinetic counterstrike. Now, I have a thought and a plan for that to piggyback onto what Stephen Murray was just saying, but I'll let people respond before we talk about that too.
Let me say, first of all, I know I've done many shows with Colonel Towner, and I've done a lot of stuff with you, Scott, and I don't believe both of you guys are outstanding people, and I think what happened today was unfortunate, and I don't know exactly. I do believe that there was some misunderstandings somewhere, but I digress. The point of the matter is that what you're talking about in terms of it's not necessarily just about black people. It's about uneducated thugs that are of whatever race. That is who is that the people who are without, they've been held down. They are the ones that I believe are going to be the ones that are going to be the prime antagonizers, because they have nothing to lose.
Some of the best soldiers I've served with have been black and Spanish and Asian. So,
But
yeah,
I'm talking about from an economic perspective, and I'm not talking about color of skin, but people from the lower rung of from the economics, they are the ones that are going to be in my opinion, that's going to be the biggest threat to social order.
we saw it in
I'm not
Minneapolis.
sure I agree with that, Ron.
Okay,
I think
please.
I think Scott's right. This is going to go kinetic. When it goes kinetic, how it goes kinetic, it's going to happen before the election. They're not going to let an election happen.
Yeah.
They're just not going to let
That's
that
right.
happen.
That's
And
right.
I've been saying it for months and months and months on my show. The reason I say that is they can't allow Trump to come back under normal circumstances for any reason. That you're talking about a group of people in DC, as well as the oligarchs on the East Coast, that have banded together with these loose marriages of convenience to keep that guy out of office. And blatantly, they
Yes.
took the presidency. To me, the 2020 election was not about the presidency. It was about the down ballot so they could take the swing states and institutionalize cheating. And then they got greedy and took the presidency all at the same time. I think they would have been perfectly happy to keep Trump in office for another 4 years if they could hamstring him. But they knew they couldn't hamstring him because he was putting more and more people in place like Kash Patel and Chris Miller that were loyal to the Constitution, and they didn't want any part of that in DOD. So that's the first part of that. How it goes kinetic, when it goes kinetic, doesn't matter. But Scott's right. This is going to go tribal and local quickly. And if you're going to survive this, it's going to be about those who have resources and those who do not have resources. But more importantly, it's going to be about who has skills and who doesn't have skills. Because you've heard me talk about line of sight and sphere of influence, right? Your sphere of influence are the people around you that you can trust when the bullets are flying. And these are people with skills, the builders, the people that are plumbers, the people that are, truck drivers, people that build houses, carpenters, etc.
Yeah.
Right. We have an entire class, and it's demographically agnostic at this point, an entire class of people who have never experienced any diversity whatsoever, or adversity, whatsoever. And they have never been through any kind of a situation where they've had to do without. And we're rapidly approaching a culmination point where logistics is going to shut down. They've architected this so logistics. And again, if you read Pawns in the Game by William Carr, all of this has been played out before, over and over again. But in this case, they're trying to drive us to a Sri Lanka moment where fuel's gone, food's gone, et cetera, and then they want to usher in the social scoring system, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. All of that plays out and goes kinetic because we're not Sri Lanka. We're armed. And there's a lot of people with a whole lot of ammo and a whole lot of guns. And I think they've resigned themselves that they can't take the firearms. So they're going after the ammunition. So we have the perfect storm brewing for a kinetic moment. Now, do I care what it is? No. What I've focused on for the last 12 months, 18 months since the 22 election is getting people prepared for what's coming. Because at the end of the day, it doesn't matter how it develops. What matters is how we respond to it. And having as many people out there that have visceral connections to their community that they can draw on when things go south. Because if we draw anything from the October 7th incident, it's that the public was completely disoriented by the amount of chaos that was going on. Whether it was precipitated, planned, doesn't matter. But the public's reaction is what we're zeroed in on. And that's what I'm zeroed in on, is to get people past the shock and awe and get them to the muscle memory and the response.
There's I'm not meaning to call this individual out, but I've got somebody in my in the live stream saying it's not going to go kinetic. The problem with military thinking is that all you got is a hammer, so everything looks like a nail. And I'm going to say, with respect, I do believe it is going to go kinetic. That is what everybody. That's not a military mindset. That is looking at things, in my opinion, that's looking at things rationally and unemotionally. You are going to have If you don't have a dollar that's functioning, you don't have electricity, you don't have a supply chain that is functioning. You've got starving people. You've got you've got a whole host of things that are going that are now happening one after another, and or simultaneously. You're not going to have a situation that can't go kinetic, because when people are hungry and they have no resources, they don't know what to do, they've never been in this situation. I mean, violence is basically the only thing left to happen. Am I wrong?
No, I think you're right, Ed. But I want to address one part of that, and that is that we're not looking at things the way we want things to go. We're looking at the way things are and calling the things that we're seeing from the indications and warnings that we're getting from the system. Now, do any of us want this to go kinetic? No, we don't want to burn the house down trying to save it. But we want to keep from going kinetic as long as we possibly can. And the way we do that, at least in my mind, and you guys can disagree, is we continue to dox and out every single plan and person and relationship that's driving the nefarious events. The more we do that, the more it disrupts their operations and makes them pivot. If we succumb to that, because look, they want a civil war. The elite literally want us at odds. It benefits them. If we can delay the kinetic as long as possible, that gives the system a chance to fail on its own. And let's face it, the system has to fail for us to rebuild it. You can't reform it from the inside. It's not going to happen.
I agree. In fact, Alpha says this. He has said this for quite some time, and I agree with it. Whether you're a good guy or a bad guy, because I do believe that there are good men in high places that are fighting a fight that we can't fight, that we don't have access to fight at just the civilian level. But whatever you have, those good guys they have to have the system collapse as well, because they're not going to try to repair a system that is in such disrepair that it is not salvageable. Would you agree with me on that? Or
Ron, we're talking about a dike. Well,
again,
let me just put this out there. I make sure I'm not muted. Okay. You said there's a fight that we can't fight on a civilian level, or something to that effect. There's a system that's about to crash and such. From a military perspective, there's an invasion that's occurring in the United States. An invasion, not a refugee resettlement, an invasion. Who's doing it? That's another concept. But the masses, camouflaged with women and children, are invading the southern border, period.
Mm-hmm.
How do you stop that? I could stop it overnight. Overnight, I could stop it. But no one else has had the brains to figure this out. Not DeSantis, not Abbott, the governor of Texas, not Trump. No one else has thought about this. Well, here's how you stop it overnight. And it entails what we're talking about. And specifically, Ron, it addresses what we seem to not be willing or able to fight on a civilian level. And you have to stop the people from coming across, invading. How do you do that? What stops anybody from doing something? Fear of death. That's why we're not all signing up to deliver food in Gaza. Fear of death. That's why Lindsey Graham isn't putting his rainbow flag on his arm and going to Ukraine and picking up a pistol and fighting. Fear of death. So fear of death stops human behavior from doing what you don't want them to do. So how do you instill fear of death into someone who is coming across the border, to stop them from coming across the border? You send death in the direction that they're going towards, so they stop. How do you do that? Very easy. You set up a Texas Guard, Texas military, Texas Ranger, Texas militia, Texas owned and controlled shooting ranges. The entire border of Texas that belongs to Texas is a shooting range, military range for Apaches and tanks and rifles and everything else, hand grenades, militias, Boy Scouts can train at different parts. You diversify it up, but you set up the whole border as a shooting range. And you do gas, tear gas to get you the initial 500 feet to 1,000 feet clear of human debris. And then you set up guys going out, setting up shooting ranges, and you go back 10 miles, free fire zone, 10 miles into Mexico. I don't give a shit what the Mexicans think or want. So 10 miles in, yeah, you could have diplomatic negotiations. That'll take a couple years, but instantly you stop the influx because they're getting bullets whiz past their head. It's a shooting range. It's owned by the Texans. It's not owned by Biden or the queers he has up next to his press secretary. It's owned by Texas. Maybe Florida could do the same thing. And how you man it, here's the other part of the equation. We have on planet Earth one of the fiercest, strongest armies and soldiers, warriors that have ever existed. Not the French, not the Germans, not the Brits, not even the Americans, because as we've discussed, we've got a bunch of homosexuals who've been put into flag level officers that hate the Constitution and love their San Francisco communism. But there is on planet Earth a warrior class of ferocious fighters that have been known throughout history. Who are they? The Russians? Well, kind of. But I've met them when I was in Russia. I've met them in prison camps. I've debriefed them. I've interrogated them. And they're not all Nazis. That's the thing. So you could take, I'll make it real easy, you could take appropriate, vetted Ukrainian officers and soldiers out of Russian jails who are going to serve 1 to 5 years that meet the criteria. You transfer custody through an interagency operation memo, Department of Justice or refugee resettlement, or just with Texas. The Texas governor puts them in his custody as an agreement with Russia, which isn't hard to do. And you transfer all these Ukrainians out of custody into the custody of Texas and the Attorney General of Texas. I know this. I've been through their jail system. I know it better than anyone. And you take these Ukrainians and you put them along the border. All you need is 100 men. You could use 1,000. You could do 10,000. But you take Ukrainians, and I could lead them to defend the border against anything that comes across, and the border invasion would end overnight. Now, I'd welcome other people to come in. I'm not Napoleon. I'm not Patton. I'm not MacArthur, but I'm someone who understands men. I understand leadership. I understand to win their hearts and minds and affection guides the barrel of their gun and aims the toss of their grenade. And it's in the direction where I point to keep me safe. That's the love that I instill in men under my command. So taking these men and putting them on the southern border and putting them downrange and putting them in the 10-mile buffer zone as scouts and recon is how you dismember and disintegrate the invasion. And also you can put them down line for the Darien Gap and other disruptive operations. And you put them with good officers and good NCOs that they love and trust. They don't fear. They do to a certain level. We all know fear of a drill sergeant, but they fear and they love more and admire more. That's how you solve the ineffectiveness of our own domestic warrior absence, vacuum deficit. You have to outsource this. And this is not anything new. They did this in the 1776. They brought in the Germans or the Hessians or whatever you want to call them to fight against the American colonists. You saw this in the Civil War too. So you transplant the Ukrainians that meet a certain criteria and pass a certain mental test and say, you're going to be in the custody of the United States for 1 to 2 to 3 to 5 years. And then after that, you'll get a green card and then be a citizen. If they're doing that anyway, why not use their system against them? And we already have Ukrainians and Russians in New York and Chicago for the past 300 years. So why leave them to rot in a jail cell? Why leave them to be destroyed in Zelensky's meat grinder? Why not use them to our advantage to defend against the hordes that are coming up from the third world? And you would get a whole line of new citizens that are grateful and loving towards the Constitution. And I'm not being Pollyannish. I'm just simply, that plan works. And if anyone's got a better one or tweaks it, I'm all ears. But I haven't heard anything other than that. as a solution to this invasion problem.
Mr. Cunningham, you have any words of wisdom?
You know, I start with the premise that you know, my people are destroyed by their lack of knowledge. Okay, that's ignorance. The technical definition is ignorance. Okay, and if we're ignorant of the fact that we're spiritual beings with a human body, and we don't understand spiritual laws and spiritual truths, our goose is cooked from before we even put our boots on. Okay, so we're fighting a spiritual war right now with demonic spiritual entities. Part of the issue that we have, kinetic is always going to happen, but spiritual and kinetic are kind of like oil and water. What I mean by that is you fight fire with fire, not fire with gasoline, right? If we're in a spiritual war, yet we have a bunch of people that don't understand spiritual principles, powers. You know, Sun Tzu said that the single greatest weapon in warfare is deception, right? And Scott said earlier, and Lieutenant Colonel Murray said, truth is the most destructive element in warfare because it blows up hundreds of billions of dollars of deception can be destroyed with one sentence of truth. I mean, to prove my point, why do we have a big tech surveillance system engineered to shut up a 64-year-old grandmother saying something on her sofa on Twitter that the deep state doesn't want her to say? This system is designed to censor truth at the microscopic level because it fears truth. Think about that. So here we are now in a narrative war, fighting on a spiritual battlefield. And a lot of people, unfortunately, have been misled or misguided or mistaught by feckless religions. A corporate religion has nothing to do with real faith. A corporate religion is a 501c3 with membership and 10% tithing and stuff. That's not the kind of church that Jesus told Peter to go forth and set up. He didn't say, look, on this rock, on these principles, on these laws, on these teachings, and everything that you've witnessed me do, on these powers and truths and lessons, go forth, Peter, and set up 47,000 501c3s with speech codes and tax benefits. That's not what he said. He said, go forth and teach the way, the laws, the principles in the community. The church is the body of Christ. It's not a 501c3. It's supposed to be where we're equipped to know how to put on the spiritual armor and fight the demons where the demons present themselves, which is 24/7, 365 in this place called Earth. So the problem is we are fighting a demonic entity. The beast system, if you will, to the best of my ability, is the central banking system that extracts energy from everyone, centralizes that power, and then they co-opt all the military industrial complex, the government, the politicians, the media, the schools, the pharmaceutical industries. All of the industries that surround us are controlled by their ability to extract our life and our time and our labor and our energy and our talents. We exchange it for their casino chips. They give us the chips and the house gets all of our labor, right? And then they weaponize all of our work to build big tech and build big pharmaceuticals and big education, quote unquote. I mean, programming, propaganda, science, they profit from the wars. Think about it. If all wars are bankers' wars, and bankers control the world. They have a built-in incentive to stay at war. So how do you fight demonic forces and kill demonic forces with an AK-47, a hand grenade, or a flamethrower? It's a spiritual entity that we've got to be able to get that muscle back and fight on the battlefield with. Look, these entities would love nothing more than a bunch of boys in my neighborhood to jump in a pickup truck and run around and start shooting people, taking matters into their own hands and just indiscriminately going kinetic, because they've got about 100 million laws and rules and statutes where they can start breaking bad on us and bringing in military law and martial law and cracking down on everybody and declaring this, the next civil war in America because we decided to get pissed off and go kinetic. Okay. I'm not saying that their plans, the evil assholes, I'm not saying it's not their plan to go kinetic. What I'm saying is, if in the event they do try to do that and start that and give the green light to 10 million folks that have come across the southern border, the point is will we have 1 million National Guard? Will we have Marines? Will we have true warriors that know what's going on, that in 16 cities can put down these soy boy latte sipping assholes that are getting paid a couple of bucks? Can our professional guys take down these assholes in 17 cities in 30 minutes? I'm hoping, I'm an eternal optimist that we have smart enough folks on our side to understand what these assholes are going to try. And they've probably war gamed at the war colleges and the PSYOP colleges and the understanding of psychological warfare, all the tricks that they have up their sleeves. I'm not saying we don't need in our neighborhoods to be aware and vigilant and ready and prepared and resourced. Of course we do. Okay. But let's hope it's more than just a complete self-reliance on me taking care of my family and my neighborhood. That's part of it. The other part is, look, if you've got, does America really think America in our military in its condition today is we're going to pick a fight with Russia and China's going to jump in? Or we're going to pick a fight with China and Russia's going to jump in? When you look at the BRICS alliance, you look at the landmass, the military, the power, the size of the armies of these folks that have more people, more military, more landmass, more resources, more manufacturing base. They have all the power and the weapons and the size and the people. If we were to compare a hollowed out America, a hollowed out Canada, a hollowed out UK, in a military conflict, do we really think on the global stage that America could pick a fight with the BRICS alliances and all of these folks and the Saudis and the Russians and the Germans and the Iranians and everybody that's already hating the dollar and the dollar system and the military industrial complex? If we were so stupid to try to start a military world war with our feckless, hollowed out, soft ass military, we'd get our asses kicked.
Yes.
Yeah, yes, and you know what, Steve, talk about the that the very same show that you did the other night where you're talking about the draft. You also had that the gentleman who had just separated, and talk a little bit about the current state of the military.
Oh, where to start?
I know.
Colonel Z.
Well, start with the COVID-19 vaccine.
Well, Lieutenant Colonel Z had just retired in October of 23, and he was pushed out because of the vaccine mandates. He refused to get the vaccine. So instead of prosecuting him through the UCMJ, they used a general officer with a letter of reprimand to start the process on him to push him out. And essentially they kept him wrapped up in either Article 15 land or in UCMJ for almost a year. He said he didn't go to work for almost a year because he was constantly under scrutiny with one accusation or one issue at, after another. And the military right now, and this is where I depart from the narrative that the military is going to step in. We don't have the same military we had in 2016. We just do not. And we don't have the state of readiness that we had in 2016. And part of that's because, number one, they're not training. Number two, everybody I know that was in the system has gotten out since 2020. Almost everyone I know. And I know people that are still in the system, and what I'm hearing from them is vastly different than what I'm seeing in alternative media. And that there's this emphasis on, in fact, I'll just talk about this is I retired in 2013. And when I left my battalion was responsible for all of the Pacific when it came to cyber defense. We were the action office for any kind of a brush fire, any kind of a cyber event in the Pacific. And we had relationships with every agency and with the 3-letter agencies, and we were very, very close with NSA as well as the DERNZA, because the work we were doing was strictly related to dealing with intrusions by foreign nations. And I can tell you that when I left that battalion, I had some of the most talented technical professionals on the planet working in that environment. And in fact, I had one NCO that he was a genius when it came to Linux operating systems, which is what powers most of our networks on the back end. And literally, this guy would go into the PACOM headquarters. He would start talking, and he'd be EF Hutton. The room would stop talking when he started talking. I left 2013. Fast forward a year and a half. They brought in a battalion commander, and I literally said to him, "You need to get your man card back. You are a battalion commander. Your first sergeant and your sergeant major are running your battalion. What is wrong with you? You need to go reach down, grab a hold of them, and get them out of the jar and put them back on, and get out front and be a leader." Because the battalion had completely changed. And then by 2016, they disbanded the battalion under, I think it was one of the SIG brigades, and they're no longer doing that mission, which kills me, because the Chinese have brigades of that. But it's a culture that they've propagated since 2008, since Obama came to town. And now it's the pendulum has swung so far to the left that you're not going to get a combat ready battalion in the field right now. Because look at how much time we used to spend in the field when the E brigades are around. The Guard and Reserve would spend months in the field to teach and to refresh and to instill operational rigor around maneuver warfare. It took months in the field just to get maneuver warfare and to do maneuver warfare efficiently. We haven't done that since the war started. And now we don't do that at all. And that's a big difference, and a very, very long departure from where we were in 2016. At least in 2016, we were coming off the war. We were still doing some maneuver. We could do actions on contact. We could do dismounted and mounted actions on contact. Now, I'd be hard pressed to say we can do that. I'm sure there's certain units in the military that are probably operating in Ukraine that can do that. But your basic infantry and armor battalion, they're not doing that training right now. And that represents a very dangerous situation. And look, everybody can sit and point fingers at Trump. He should have, he could have, he might have. You can should all over yourself. But the truth of the matter is, when you're in the situation he was in 2020, he didn't have a road either way that was going to be not civil war, that was not going to lead to civil war. And I've heard a bunch of different arguments to and fro of what that situation could be or should be. But when you look at the situation where we are now, the military we have isn't even the same as what we had in 2020. And I don't see how they're going to step in and pull anything off.
Let me just say real quick, Colonel, I think, and sometimes we do use the term military in a generic sense. And I don't necessarily, I think there's a lot of elements of the military. There's surveillance, there's intelligence, there's comms, there are military police, there's military tribunals, there's military intelligence, there's military interception, of breaking down communications. There's a lot of aspects to the military that aren't the kinetic side, that aren't the battles, that aren't the battalions, that aren't going to necessarily fight on the battlefield and come into downtown Atlanta and start taking on, 114 assholes. That's not, when I say military, in my mind, when that word comes out of my mind, it's more on the strategic, intelligence, psychology, communications, supply chain when necessary, those types of intelligence officers going after the root and branch. It's almost like going after the infrastructure of the invaders more so than it is, getting the 82nd Airborne to go into Dallas, Texas and take them over. I'm not thinking kinetic military as much. And I'm not saying that there couldn't be some activation of the militia. And if you listen to Derek Johnson, the militia has been running around outside of each state's borders and all over the United States like they've been having a damn party since March of 2020. So you can look at all kinds of National Guard flights and call signs on aircraft and folks from even outside the United States by just tracking, monkey works and looking at the call signs and the nationalities of these planes flying all over the United States. They're not on training missions. They're not doing training. So there's something's going on. Something's going on, but it's not involving bombs, air-to-air combat, or anything else along those lines. So I just believe that there's an element of military intelligence engaged in this conflict that's happening behind the curtains. And 3% of Americans have ever served in the military? 97% of the people can barely spell military. As Derek likes to say, 68% of Americans cannot name the 3 branches of our government. Now that leaves us at 32% of the people that even know what the hell might be going on. So,
well, one of the solutions to this is using the untapped resources that we have in the Civil Air Patrol, the Navy Cadets, the Devil Dogs, the junior ROTC programs between 14 and 18. I was in the Civil Air Patrol, and it made me the hardened steel so that when I went into the Army, I was simply polished and given an edge, a serrated edge. But the Civil Air Patrol, Devil Dogs, Navy Cadets, those 14 to 18-year-olds are the untapped gold resources that we have, as long as they're not overly polluted with COVID-19. But even that can be remedied. The Indian Black Sav is proving to do that. But tapping into these youth networks and inspiring them to be intelligence, surveillance, and reconnaissance, empowering them to be the eyes and ears, and empowering them and telling them and giving them leadership, how to watch what's happening on these airports, and a whole variety of things. That's what you do to succeed when your military has become so feckless or so corroded or so rotted or all of the above. And there's always good men, and your articulation of how the best men have come out since 2020, that veteran core is ready to stand up, especially officers who are worth a damn, not these silly pontificating, feminist equal rights sort of arguments and debates. I don't have time for that. We're being invaded. It's a war. Get your game face on. Get your boots on. This isn't a political discussion. This is a discussion of whether or not Rome falls or not. And the only way to stop Rome from falling is to bring in Ukrainian mercenaries who have been trained and vetted, and activating our youth corps, and then building upon strengthening our own esprit de corps all over again. And I'll end it by saying we have severe rehabilitation that is required to get our country back up to a performance. And I don't mean you have to wear the uniform or go into the military. There's a lot of people in the audience, Ron, and elsewhere, that wanted to serve and couldn't serve for whatever reason. I
Mhm.
want men and women who want to serve, who can serve, and you don't need to have a damn uniform that has a rainbow flag under the Army, under Milley, or any of these other fools. You have to just have the heart of a warrior and commit to defending as a warrior your town, your county, your state, your pocket of America. And as long as you walk the earth, the Constitution and the American Republic stands in your particular state, your particular republic. Let's call it what it is: the Republic of Texas, the Republic of California, the Republic of Florida, the Republic of New Hampshire,
Right.
the Republic of Vermont, the Republic of Illinois. Your republic stands as long as you walk the earth. You don't take commands from a fake president, Joe Biden, or any of his minions. So this has got to be a local, a state, a county level. That's why Texas is the fountain from which all of this needs to start erupting. Florida would be good, but DeSantis seems to have his head up his ass when he talks about Ukraine and Russia. And criticizing Israel, that also came out of DeSantis, which is a stupid thing. You boycott Israel or any of these countries because you disagree with their genocide, and somehow you're afoul of Florida's rules. You need to get your head on straight, DeSantis. That doesn't apply. Not when we're being invaded. So I just want to put there, we need to do a total reorientation of who we are, where we are, and what we have as resources that are pure. What resources do we have that have the highest degree of functionality and integrity? And it's a very small number that has that integrity and functionality. And I'd say the young are the best hope, because there you have a 10-year, you can take a 14-year-old, make him special forces by within a year or two, and then that special forces over the next 10 years, that 14-year-old goes into a 24-year-old, and boom, he is Rambo with a Hannibal Lecter IQ and a Darth Vader mercilessness and defending the border and the Constitution. Isn't that what warriors are supposed to be?
Yeah. Let's go to Steve, and then let's go to Ghost, because Ghost is. We want to make sure Ghost is awake. Steve.
No, I'm here. I'm here. I had just terrible issues with.
No worries. Mr. Murray, you were gonna say.
I was just going to say, back to Rob's point, right? We're in an information war right now. We're not in a kinetic war. And my comments were strictly related to readiness from a military perspective versus the kinetic side of the house. Your point's well taken, right? That this is a information war, not a kinetic war. And it goes back to what I was saying earlier, that the best thing we can do right now is prolong the kinetic as long as possible. And Scott, I'll disagree with you in the sense that I think it's going to take decades to unwind what's been done to this country, and it's going to take all of us to do it. And we're going to have to resuscitate something that's been taken out of the schools for almost 2 decades, and that's selfless service, right? We don't teach that. We don't instill that. That's not in our ethos anymore. And once we reform the system and we get to a place where the country's stable and we have control of our borders and we have a functioning government, and the next piece is, how do we reform government so this never happens again? And it's gonna take, in my mind, compulsory, involvement in the civic side of the house. Because what's the one thing that we as conservatives don't do? We're not in lockstep in the civil side of our government. We just don't participate like the left does. The left they're in lockstep. They have the same talking points, they have the same narratives, and they all march in the same tune. We need to get to that place where we're not only teaching in school, but we're all marching to the same tune of selfless service. We've lost that, and it's been bred out of our society.
I have a thought on that, Stephen, but I want to hear what Ghost has to say. Did you have something you wanted to inject there, Ghost?
Yeah, we have, I think, probably the biggest problem that no one, and it's been touched upon here, that no one's really looking at. This administration has left us logistically in the lurch. It would take 2 years, for example, for something as simple as a Stinger missile to get the redesigns and uh, the production. 2 years. 2 years. We're not producing enough 155s because the bottom line is there are factions that want kinetic warfare. Look at the Middle East. They didn't get what they wanted in Ukraine. The Middle East are trying to push it. Um, that's why, in a sense, like today with the fear porn exercise that was thrust upon the American people, we're in a place now where, okay, simple example, you want transgender surgery, it's available for you in the military. This is insanity. Insanity. We have, I said a few years ago, I said it publicly that there's going to come a time when the middle officer corps and the higher NCO corps is are going to have to make very hard decisions. Decisions there, you know, yes, an unlawful or immoral order you can refuse. But this is being done so insidiously that when this time comes to where yay or nay decisions have to be made by the individuals, whatever tier of power they're in the military. I have difficulty with that. Are they going to step up and say, no, I'm not going to do X, Y, or Z. I will not commit my forces, those under, whether it's at division or lower. I see that being a terrible issue, where they're going to have to make moral decisions. And are they prepared for it? Are they going to worry about, okay, being thrown, in corrective custody or the brig or worse? And that right there, and the idea of it pushing a civil war, the the data points are all around us. They do want a kinetic war. They do want a World War III or IV, depending on your perspective. They do want civil unrest and possibly a civil war in this country. Look at the film that is premiering, I think, later this week. I've seen clips of it where they're you know, we're Americans. Well, what kind of American are you? That kind of thing.
Yeah.
Where did it, these are, we're in a very dangerous crossroad with all of that. And
We are.
will,
I'd like to say that you know, I think you're right on the money there. You know, they need to have a civil war or a World War III because they need to conceal all of the financial crimes that they've been engaged in for the last 100 years. They need to conceal the fact that they've basically stolen everybody's money, all of their pension plans, all that stuff. They need to hide that. Um, uh, you know, and going back to something that you touched upon, Steve, you know, the the conservatives, in my humble opinion, conservatives have been taught by the by the left, you know, in the school system that has been run by the left is what I mean. That you know, all of this thing about federal supremacy. Meanwhile, what they have been doing is they have been engaged exclusively at, not exclusively, but for the most part, at the county level, at the local and county level, at the state level. You know, conservatives are, well, you know, hey, all we got to do is just get the right president in there and everything is going to be okay. Meanwhile, the left has been engaged in political uh, they've been occupying all of the meaningful local jurisdictions, be it the county supervisor, the city. What am I trying to say? The school boards, the uh, the city councils, you know, the state elections, all these things. That's what they've been engaged in. And so they have control over all of the local stuff. And all we think is, oh, all we need to do is get the president in there, you know, as though we live in a dictatorship. And it's maddening to see that mindset come from people on the right. It's supremely frustrating to me. But you know, you're talking about how civics, we haven't had true civics taught in our school system for what I think they
30
stopped.
years.
Yeah,
30
they
years.
stopped teaching government. I remember they stopped teaching U.S. government when I was I remember I was going to be. I graduated in 1987, and uh, the guy who was going to teach that class, I was supposed to be when I was a senior, and I didn't have to take it. That was the first year that they didn't have to have it. That was 1987. So it's insanity. So
Ron,
and
but
Ron,
from
it's
a, from a
intentional.
just, excuse me, I don't mean to cut you off, but from a purely logistical standpoint, we are not, we can't get ships built. We can't replenish what we've handed over to Ukraine, for example, and what they're trying to pull us in. And there are people in the Middle East right now. We know that stationed all over. We are in a very, very dire position, and this comes from some of the consulting and work I do. We are in a very dire position from a logistical standpoint, from manpower to how they're trained. We're in a very bad position as far as munitions. Um, there are so many issues that are not being touched upon on a broad enough scale right now regarding that most basic aspect of supporting the military, that uh, if anything should escalate, I mean, right, you know, as of a week and a half, 2 weeks ago, there's two divisions along a 40 kilometer gap, um, with Russia, Belarus, and Poland and Ukraine. Now this is kind of like the Fulda Gap in
Mhm.
the old Cold War times,
Right.
Germany. They got 2 divisions, at least 140 plus SA-400 anti-aircraft units already in place. This is what can be seen. This is satellite recon that can be seen. You've got uncounted truckloads of sand in the various villages and towns along this gap. And then in reserve, you've got Wagner, and you've got several other divisions. So it's estimated about 5 more divisions in reserve on Russian territory and in Belarus. And NATO is, poking the bear. And Putin has made it patently clear that, if we move in, if meaning NATO or NATO forces begin to do any type of movements that they don't like, they're ready to pull the trigger on that. And, this is what is, again, of deep concern to me and many others, that, we're not prepared. You can't shark attack. I've said this before. You can't shark attack kids in Army basic training. All right. I've seen videos that trainees have smuggled out where they're sassing back to their drill instructors. And then there is not even a standard level of physical fitness that one has to pass in order to move on from basic to training and then to a duty station. And we went from 74% down to, I think we're at 37% of those who walk into a recruiting station and say, I want to serve. Only 37% roughly are being accepted. Now you run them through the basic training and their additional training. When they are then assigned to a unit, a lot of them are being just papered out. No, you're not fit. We don't want you. We can't use you. You're not even prepared. And there's so many aspects of what I just said. Marine Corps, no. I don't know about the Air Force. I don't think they've gone to that, stooped to that level. Navy, it's laxed off a little bit, and we're not prepared to deal with a two-front war, say if Taiwan moved on and if Europe took a turn or the Middle East took a turn for the worse. We can't produce a lot of across the board. We are not prepared to produce.
We're not prepared for a
we need.
one-front war, much less a two-front war.
Exactly. We're not prepared to execute any type of warfare
No,
on the
and
level
in
that's
fact,
required right now. And this is it's very concerning, and it's very
when you look at all of
distressing.
you look at all of the military hardware that we've sent overseas, and it's just we leave it there. It's all gone. All of our resources are gone, and we don't have the ability. Murray was talking about earlier. We don't have the ability to replenish anything, and all of our resources are gone. And now, what was this? The last week they talked about they're not even going to redo the replenish the oil reserves.
Mhm.
I mean,
Yeah,
it's
the
ridiculous.
strategic reserves. It's and this since this administration, whatever you want to call it, came into, and let's say there may be there's a lot more to these points that are being brought up that we're not discussing because
Gentlemen,
we
I've
would
got to
be
go.
talking-
I'll see you later. I've got to jump off for another show. I don't want to interrupt, but I've got to tell you I've got to leave. So it's been stimulating.
Scott, thanks for coming in. Good to see you, sir.
Thank you, Scott.
Take care, Scott.
Hasta la vista.
But you know, this is where mm, Congress not addressing it, the military itself is not addressing it. There are those who are trying, but we are in a very, very bad position right now. And that's why I said, you know, something as simple as, and everyone also said something as simple as what happened today with the eclipse, the line of totality, and things that they did as far as keeping kids home from school, saying, oh, traffic was going to be worse. Uh, who buys that?
Nobody.
Who buys that? No, this. So we're headed down a slope that if it's not reversed, this country is in serious trouble. And you know, and I'll bring up, and this is not uh, uh, conspiratorial nonsense. Location in Georgia. A friend of mine who spent a couple of days here over the weekend brought up that remember the plastic coffins that were ordered in huge amounts, barbed wire facing in, not out, around the perimeter, because there's trails in the woods surrounding it where people like to you know, ride their four-wheelers and trucks. Well, this very good friend of mine went up to the gate. It was being guarded by foreign nationals from Africa. And that's not the only we've heard, you know, the people that were railroaded for the January 6th. I don't know what to call it because it was just it was a, you know, we know what set it up, we know how it was set up, and then it was again, Goebbels would be proud how it was pumped into the consciousness of the country through mainstream media.
Mhm.
For those the majority who are, you know, whether they're considering it or not, they're listening and believing. A good portion of people are believing a good portion of what is being said. The insurrection, there was no insurrection. Anyone with the common sense knows that. But where they brought these individuals, they were being guarded by foreign nationals. Again, a lot of them from African countries.
Lieutenant Colonel, you actually were talking about something similar to that on one of your previous shows, where you said that I guess you talked to a police chief, or somebody had talked to a police chief where they came upon a kind of a I don't know, some sort of an encampment where there was a whole bunch of foreign nationals. I don't know if they were Venezuelan or whatnot, but they were all kitted out and squared away and self-sufficient, had vehicles and everything, and they were just I mean, basically looked like they had been supplied by government officials. Do I remember that? Am I remembering that correctly?
Yeah, it's so essentially there's a lot of these stories popping up now around the country, but we're seeing more and more military age males that are showing up into different, let's just say, private property areas that have been purchased either by, Chinese or somebody else, where they're actively doing training. I mean, that's not a secret anymore. About 6 months ago, it would have been a conspiracy theory, but now and you're seeing law enforcement starting to report it across the country. And we'll see more of it in the coming days. I think they're going to be less and less. Let's just say they're going to obfuscate it less and less. But Ghost is right. We're at a critical moment right now. We're at a culmination point for the country, and it's to me, all of this is by design. They're putting all of this in place.
Absolutely.
And they're playing off the complacency of the American people. They're playing off the fact that you spoke about education. Education's been turned into an indoctrination center years ago. Like, this DEI thing is not new. Neither is cancel culture. None of this is new.
No.
All of this stuff started back in 2001, after 9/11, because you were either with us or with the tourists. And if you said anything against the military or the government back in 2001 to 2008, you were basically cut off. So cancel culture has been around for a very, very long time. They just rebranded it. But I can tell you that there's definitively encampments around the U.S. that are close to military bases, close to critical infrastructure. And what I've been zeroed in on, and what my team has been zeroed in on, is watching what are the movements of the Chinese and where the Chinese operating. And if you look at Colonel Lawrence Sellon, he's somebody you should have on your show. Just do an interview with him, just one-on-one, because he is tracking Chinese operations across the U.S. with Chinese nationals that are American citizens now that do not want the CCP operating here. And he's highlighted a lot of this and a lot of their activity through NGOs, et cetera. And, Ghost is spot on.
And their police substations they put here. And
Thank you.
Their claim is that, they want to, they're concerned about policing, the tongs and the various Chinese organized crime groups that are operating in this country. I don't think there's so much policing them. I think they're posing as that, and offering just basic intelligence by this charade. I've said before, a very close friend of mine who is close to the family of 9. We know who that is, and he called me one day and was I hadn't heard this tone of voice and demeanor from him ever in the years I've known him. He said, I pulled up to a light in Orlando, and next to me was a squad car, police squad car, kitted out with everything that ours would be: lights, computer, all of the gear, and not a word of English was written on that car designating what it was. It was in Chinese. The only thing I asked him is, did you take a shot of the plates? Did you, what else did you notice? And this was a few years back. And we know that a few years prior to that, it had begun in Canada, where very easy Very easy for them to do that in Canada. We could go on about that for an entire 4 hours. But they're here in major cities, San Francisco, New York. Well, they're in locations in Florida, throughout the country, Texas, California. How? Think of this. No one is saying, just like the poisoning of the of farmland to acquire it and to take mom and pop farms, put them in a position of jeopardy, threatening that with foreclosure. You know, the helicopter, 3 o'clock in the morning helicopter flights that are trying to trace sources of water to poison it for cattle, the poisoning of farmland, whatever they had been dropping on it in certain locations leaves the soil unusable for 3 years. But yet no one is talking about any of this. Chinese police stations here. The attack on our food production infrastructure, the attack on our energy infrastructure, and then what happened along the eastern seaboard primarily, but throughout the country a few weeks ago, with the outages in communications. We're looking at something so nefarious and so dangerous to the average American. And as far, I wrote an email that went to a number of people. This was right at my analysis, and that, along with others, back in November of 19, said they're going to finally do a binary biological event in this country. COVID. COVID wasn't the issue, the actual pathogen. It was, again, the cure. And now you're seeing published future population tables where we're losing tens of millions of people. Look at it. There's not one individual, I think, in this audience that has not had someone suffering or die as a result of the jab. And it was all done by compliance. Well, I would be fired if I didn't get it. Well, trust in a higher power at that point. Yes, it may be a stressful period where you've got to say, I've got to let go of this career or this job, but I'm not getting that. And I can't tell you how many people I know that are that have passed away, or family member has prematurely because of that one event alone. And we haven't seen the end of that. We're seeing a rise in the mention of plagues like bubonic plague, Black Death, which is highly curable these days. But you've got to know the symptoms. And it's the difference between living and dying from that is 24 to 36 hours. It feels like the flu coming on with the symptoms: body aches, nausea, dizziness, fever. And you think, well, I've just got a bad cold or flu coming on. And you try to use over the counter or, go see your doctor, and you're not thinking in those terms. That's just one. And lately there have been articles pointing to Oregon, New Mexico, and other places in the Southwest because it's transmitted through flea bites. There's a rodent issues more in the Southeast than in just about any other region of the country. These are all aspects that they are doing. They are priming the pump, so to speak, on every front to weaken this nation. And I fear again another biological event. And things like today are simply a determiner of metrics of chatter and how people are going to respond, how their let's say the overall response to these types of things have changed since COVID. And I'll use that as a milestone because when they were working on the first stages of that with H1N1 back in 9, 10, and 11.
Are you guys
we
familiar
know.
with? Excuse me, real quick. Are you guys familiar with the Deagle numbers?
Yeah, the Deagle report where it talks about 500 million left
Yeah,
after the
I'm
mass
gonna share my screen here real quick because I want to show this. I don't know if everybody's if everybody's familiar with this, but I'm going to share this real quick with everybody. This is the Deagle report. This is from 2015. Let me make this a little bit bigger so that people can see it. But they estimated that the population in 2015 was 319 million. And they estimated the forecast for 2025 that the population in the United States would be down 65 million and that the world population would be down 6.7 billion by 2025. So this is and Deagle is it's kind of like it's an institution that helps people forecast or helps people like predict on what they're going to need for in terms of like military hardware and things of that nature. You can probably speak to that a little bit better than I can, Steve.
Yeah, it's like Stratfor or Rain Corporation's think tank that does analysis for the government. But I think Ghost is talking about the same thing we've been talking about in the sit reps and in the roundtables for the past 6 months, that all these lines of operation is really what you're talking about, lines of operation, right? Logistics, food production, all those lines of operations are being affected all at the same time. And as I said before, they're driving us to a Sri Lanka moment. And, my team has disagreed with, we've agreed and disagreed over the next biological attack. Colonel Conrad seems to think that they're going to release at the same time they're collapsing the system a more virulent biological weapon. I don't know if I agree with that or not. I honestly think that their plans are not fully baked because of the fact that alternative media has disrupted their plans over and over again. And I say that because I go back to September, October, when Alex Jones came on and did the broadcast where he was talking about the mask mandates coming back last year, and then they didn't materialize because of that broadcast. I think the more that we disrupt their operations, the less effective their operations are. But I do think that they have a more virulent strain of something sitting in the wings as a trump card, for lack of a better word, that they'll pull out and use at the opportune time. Because look, they're not going to go quietly into the night. We all know that, right? They're not going to give up control. Yeah. They're going to fight until the system collapses around them. Like, we're very reminiscent of the Roman Empire just before their collapse, if you look at all the indicators. And I think that we're going to see it just from the vax staff. Like, and Ghost, to be perfectly transparent, I have two friends. One of them died in front of me after getting the vax. Another one died 24 hours after getting a booster. And these are people I was very close to. And I have family members that have been vaxxed and boosted, and to say that I don't worry about them every day would be an understatement. But you're right. The long-term effects are yet to disclose themselves. But there's no coincidence between the rash of sudden deaths and unexplainable deaths and people that have gotten vaxxed that can't be explained. And
the covering up of uh, what is
there's
the covering up of autopsy results. The individual died in a motorcycle accident. Though they may have passed out because of that strange protein substance that was building up in the arteries. And so they've skewed the numbers on all of this. And this is known. French intelligence put out some very good information on that quite a while back. And we're making similar predictions of the future. And we're looking at the effects hitting more so later this year into 25 and 26.
I figured
And
it
if
would be sooner. But to be honest with you, I figured it'd be within 2 years we would see a mass die off. I thought within 24 months of the first shots, we'd see a mass die off that they couldn't explain. So
I think they wanted to keep. They've kept everything subtle and diverted of those who actually have died of the jab, and that's why it's not an issue in the popular mind, in the mass mind. It's not, and there's a lot of denial involved with that. People who did get it, who didn't want to get it, don't want to face the fact that they have a ticking time bomb in them that can be triggered even with another addition. I mean, you have a direct attack would be, say, battlefield anthrax. But a binary attack would be like we saw. And in November of 2019, I made that assessment and put it to a number of people in particular places that look, this would be the logical step. That the pathogen itself wouldn't be the culprit. It would be what the cure or the vaccine would be, what would be the binary effect. Now, with the bonding proteins that we know were engineered, there could be any number of other pathogens out there that would have very, very subtle side effects, but could then even, let's say, resuscitate in the individuals who did get the vaccination and make it far worse, far more rapid. And these technologies are there. They've been there. And I do believe, yes, the more they're backed into a corner, the more they're apt to use something like that. But we're being, what astounds me is that, and not with this administration, I expect, nothing to be determined and stood behind firmly in the idea that we are under attack. It's not 5GW. I would call it 7GW, because you have to take. There's one aspect of one of the greatest tools that they used, which is the law. And if you remove linear time from that and you go back in this country, even as far as 1812, you see the incremental acts, treaties, laws, methods of operation that have been put in place. We're still in a state of emergency. We have always been, all of us listening to this, if you were born prior to 1933, you were born prior to the banking holiday state of emergency, which was never declared or repealed or declared null and void. As a matter of fact, a congressional a committee that was formed in 1973 not only proved that fact, but at that time had uncovered over 560 entries into U.S. code that supported the extreme measures that only the executive branch could take without having to go through Congress, such as committing foreign troops for combat in foreign countries. And look at all that's happened since Korea, Vietnam. The list goes on and on and on and on to this day. The last 20 years of so-called warfare we've had in place that has finally come to just a dull simmer compared to what it was. So, you know, we are, and it's going to take someone to say Trump gets back into office. Someone has to name that 800-pound gorilla in the room with its 2-ton pet elephant that we are under attack from every aspect you can imagine, from logistics to cyber to cultural, you name it. We're under attack. Who says a war has to be fought, has to be and on a kinetic basis to be recognized as a war? That's all gone. That's the result of not recognizing depth and from the county level, local level on up, that has been manipulated for the past 3 to 4 decades in particular, that has resulted in where we are today. It's much cheaper, it's much easier to skew the results of local elections, which then disrupt the entire operations of a single state out of 50, let alone our protectorates. We are at war right
Ghost,
now.
if I can, let me jump in there real quick.
Sure.
If I can say, that's kind of what the 17th Amendment was done, and the same thing with Reynolds v. Sims. It's easy to manipulate the legislature, but the Senate seats were much harder to manipulate. But that's why the 17th Amendment is such a big deal in the Constitution, because it essentially rendered the Senate a glorified House of Representatives, because it went to a direct vote of the people, as opposed to the legislative bodies which were the state governments that were supposed to be voting for them, meaning that the federal government was able to be controlled much more so. And then with the Federal Reserve, the complete reversal flow of the money, yes, and the SES and whatnot. Listen, Steve actually has a hard shut off at 2:30, so let's wind it down here real quick. And I want to give everybody just a real quick kind of a last word just some parting thoughts. But I want to make sure that everybody gets a final say before he has to leave. Steve, if you want to go first, fire away.
Sure. So I usually end every show with final thoughts on how to be prepared, and I think that's given what Ghost has been saying, which by the way is in line with what we've been talking about for the past year and a half. You should be prepared for contingencies instead of a contingency. And when we talk about that, we talk about having food and water on hand, having medical supplies on hand, having a couple of months of your your standard medicines on hand. Those are that should be normal day-to-day operations, right? And people get wrapped up in the term preppers. You're not prepping. You're getting ready for you and your family to get through a contingency, whatever that may be. I don't think anybody here knows what it is going to look like when it does occur and it does materialize, but something is on the horizon. We are on the event horizon right now.
Yes.
Whether that's today, whether that's tomorrow, doesn't really matter. But they are planning something big, and the proof's in the pudding when you start hearing it across alternative media. And it doesn't matter who the messenger is. What matters is if the message is signal, you should be paying attention to it. And right now there's a lot of signal out there across alternative media related to what the elite are doing, what the government's doing, and what our adversaries are doing. And I would say, don't get wrapped up in trying to figure out what the event is. Get wrapped up in building your sphere of influence around you. Go out and make a visceral connection with your neighbors. Go out and make a visceral connection with people in your neighborhood and find out who's there, who belongs there, who doesn't belong there. That will increase your line of sight from your local area out. And that's where your focus should be. That's all I've got to say about that.
Absolutely.
I love that. Always cracks me up, Forrest. Mr. Cunningham.
Yeah, we're so much in alignment, I think, guys, on so many different aspects of what's before us. But the way I see how we've gotten to this point has been a slow, intentional disconnect. We are historically, culturally, financially, and spiritually bankrupt. And, we want to know how the borders are open and how the CCP are all over the place. Well, look no further than, I did a report 2 weeks ago on the greatest fraud ever attempted. We've got the SEC, JP Morgan, Ethereum, and the CCP trying to take over the next era monetary system, and James O'Keefe did a report on it 3 days ago and said 140 million views on what's called ETHgate, where you have a partnership between the CCP and the SEC and JP Morgan and Ethereum, and they're trying to take over our financial system. And Congress isn't saying jack crap about it. And the reason is they're all compromised. They're all bought. They are.
Absolutely.
And to take it one step further, we ceased being a constitutional republic between the years of 1913 and 1933. We came out of 5 days of bankruptcy after FDR under the New Deal, reorganized by the IRS statute code, not by our Constitution. But the great deception has been that we're a representative constitutional government. We've been play acting one, while all the power has rested in a 10 by 10 square mile swamp, an NGO sovereign swamp called the District of Columbia. And we've been playing representative government, voting for uniparties, buying the media narrative, taking, ethics, civics, debate, common sense, biblical knowledge out of the classrooms and basically propagandizing people into everything in this world that's anything but true. So how do we get here? We were slowly drained of our wisdom, our knowledge, and our understanding of who we are and whose we are. So how do we get out of it? I mean, I think when we get to the point where everybody's pretty much lost everything and they've got nothing else to lose, and they realize we've been lied to collectively kind of since the day we were born, that's one hell of an adversary you don't want to have to go up against. And these 2% or 3% demonic Luciferian asshole cartel folks, from the Rothschilds to the Rockefellers, that invented this monetary system that slowly over time put 90% of the world's resources in the hands of 2 or 3% of the people, are going to rue the day that the vast majority wake up and say, I don't give a shit anymore. There's nothing you can do to me. Game on. When you've lost the narrative and you've lost the confidence and you've lost the trust, and you know that we as people have been royally screwed, that's what dynasties falling are made of. We are witnessing the fall of a dynasty right now. The question is, how will we respond? How will we as a collective people, how will local leaders, local warriors, local truth warriors, people that are common sense, love for God, love for humanity, and are not cowards, how is that percentage of the population going to respond when this house of cards collapses? That's the question we have to all ask ourselves.
Yep.
I think things are being rebuilt. I see the architectural design of the world's next monetary system that levels the playing field. I see our ability to disconnect and unplug the Luciferian 2% from their ability to zap all of our wealth, time, labor, and talents away from us by going direct with distributed ledger technology and architecture. I'm not saying that this is a magic pill that's going to happen overnight, but what I'm saying is there's been a long anticipated plan of replacing a monetary system that everybody on this earth knew was going to zero. Every fiat monetary system on earth that's built on usury and based on fiat currencies printed out of nowhere without sound money, the math goes to zero 100% of the time. We know it, they know it, Russia knows it, China knows it, Saudi Arabia knows it. Every nation in the world knew and anticipated that this monetary system was going to zero. The question has been, who has been planning for the other side of zero, and for how long? That's the question I think we have to all ask ourselves.
Yeah. Ghost?
I couldn't agree more. The three modes of control for the last several thousand years has been finance, and I'll give it modern terms, finance, law, and politics/religion. Not God, religion. We've seen each one of them take a morph into, especially since the Civil War, where I think in Texas versus White, you'll find a very long syllabus at the end of that, where you'll find statements made as the 11 southern states were under Reconstruction. We will slowly replace the uniforms with suits, and until the people don't know the difference. And in those days, that was a much easier thing to do. We have to openly discuss and define what we really have as what people would call a government, as opposed to a fiction of authority, privately owned, privately governed, way above the level. for profit, and basically under the concepts, very well developed concepts of what you term human capital management. And our grandfathers and great grandfathers were born into this lie, this great lie. Why do so many members of key positions in civil service in what is termed the federal government have dual citizenship with Israeli passports, for example?
Mhm.
Same thing applies to Congress. How could Congress vote itself sovereign immunity? And no one stood up to say, oh, what are you talking about? Sovereign immunity. There is a layer that governs this whole planet that operates under sovereign law, giving them immunity simply because they have ownership. And the ownership is done through the global banking system. It's a very simple case in point is when the neocons came out with the Project for a New America, I believe it was
Yeah,
called.
PNAC, Project for a New American Century.
Yeah.
Who's
And
ironic, real quick? Whose husband, Victoria Nuland, who's got her fingerprints in Ukraine right now. Husband was one of the authors of that 20 years ago.
yeah, and one of the not incentive, but one of the biggest aspects of that plan was to conquer basically 7 nations in 5 years. If you look at the BIS affiliate or BIS member map at that time, each one of those countries had something to offer resource-wise and were not members. And they dealt through what you'd call affiliate banking with the central banking system. Libya is a prime example. He wanted to create, Muammar Gaddafi wanted to create a pan-African currency based on gold. And they had the resources to do it. People were still fighting after the Christopher Stevens debacle. Murder of Christopher Stevens is what it should be termed as. They were still fighting when representatives from BIS, which those 3 buildings are, again, as I've said many times, they come under the UN, the privately owned fiction of authority. They come under the International Standards Organization, it's 3166-1. Now it goes from 001 to 999. When you get to 900 series, you're talking about incorporated or unincorporated private principalities. That's where you would place the square mile of the City of London, where you would place 10 by 10, 100 square miles of the District of Columbia. That's where you place Monaco. That's where you would place those 3 buildings in Basel, Switzerland, which is the central bank of all the central banking system, BIS. Now, all of this is privately owned at this sovereign layer. And you have many factions that have their hands in on it and controlling it. The Vatican, 146 acres. I could be wrong with that. Somewhere in that. It's not that big at all. Again, private, unincorporated principality. Answers to no one or nothing on the planet, the same as BIS. Answers to no higher authority on the planet. Does not answer to the people. And there's other locations around the planet. People would be very surprised to know their locations and their names and what they do, what their function is. Panama went sour, so Costa Rica and El Salvador now picking up that slack. Various locations in the Caribbean, Grand Cayman Island, for example. This is what we're looking at. We're looking at people work and they trade their most precious commodity that God has given them, that no government gave their parents permission. They didn't ask for permission. They can ask for permission to have a child that is monetized at birth. All right. This entire system now was moved from various locations in Europe to Auckland, New Zealand, for accounting purposes. Why? Because back in 2013, Obama changed the international date line to make that the first trading and banking center to open. And a maxim of law that people need to remember is first in time, best in law. And people need to start to look into these things. And there's a number of us who should be doing more in exposing, not exposing, but explaining how they work. And, until we understand that we are trading our very most, and so I'll close with this, that we are trading our very most precious essence and gift from the Creator, from the moment we're born to the moment we die, based on a commodity that we don't even own. We call it money. And I beseech people, please learn the essence of mammon, what that concept is about, what it represents, and then you will begin to understand what money actually is and how it plays at the core of all of this. You throw money at a given idea, that idea becomes a reality, when it should be quite the opposite. It should be what's best for the greatest good.
Money is the drug, Ghost. Money is the drug of the beast system.
Indeed.
It is the opiate.
Let me jump in here real quick. There was something that I wanted to a couple of things that I wanted to get off my chest before we go. A good friend of mine wrote an article about the end of the Roman Empire called America's Roman Collapse Moment. And I'm not going to read the entire article, but at the very tail end, he's got about 9 bullet points. The leadership in Rome on the way to collapsing the empire provided gifts to the public from the treasury, controlled farming and other key industries with subsidies, ceased to expect assimilation by newcomers to the Roman society, increased taxation regulations, especially upon rival businessmen, violated the 12 tables or their version of the Constitution through legal activism, kept the opposition off the ballot, arrested the supporters of the opposition, accusing them of insurrection, tied the opposition up in court with legal challenges, seized the properties and businesses of anyone considered to be the opposition, rigged elections, and championed sexual deviation and persecuted those who disagreed. I just thought that was quite astonishing of how similar we are Rome right now. And then last thing I want to say,
Rome never died.
And then
Ron,
last
yes,
thing,
that's true. Ron, would you share that with me or just send me a text message, that link?
sure will. I'll share it with everybody in the
Please.
in the group. And then last thing, I know that they're talking about this could take a long time. This is there's a couple of instances in history where we have had where things have looked really, really bleak and things have come back very fast. And one of those is 1930s Germany. And you say what you want about Hitler, and I'm not saying this is a lot as a lauding Hitler, but I am saying that there is an example of how things were really, really bad and things came back on a dime. You look at what happened in 1934 when he became chancellor to the time of 1936, 37. He completely transformed the German society. And I'm not saying for the good or bad.
With the help of Western
right.
money.
Right. But the point I'm trying to make is that, one of the main things that he did was he got rid of the banking system. With the usury and whatnot. That was one of the main things that he did. And
had installed high-ranking Nazis.
Again, I'm not. This isn't. I'm not. I'm not
Yeah.
saying this as a as promoting him.
No, I know that. No, I'm just saying these are actual moves they made.
Yeah.
So go ahead. I'm sorry.
Yeah, but anyway, I'm just saying there are examples in history when things have come back fast, and I do think that when once we get through the other side of this collapse, whatever's going to happen, I think we could be in a situation where it could take 20, 30 years for it to come back, or we could be in a situation where it's going to come back pretty quick. And I do think that with the blockchain technology and the ability for money to go to transit quickly, I tend to think that we're going to rebound much more quickly than it's going to be a very lengthy process. But only time is going to tell, and we are going to need to keep a positive attitude. And but that's
10
just
10 seconds, Ron. Every single major turning point in biblical history happened in a day, one day.
Yeah.
With the Creator and alignment with the Creator and best of the human spirit. Yes, it can be overturned rapidly.
Yeah.
And this is what the opposition does know.
Yeah,
so I place no time constraints on any.
That's why the point I'm trying to make is I'm trying to give people a little bit of hope that, look, this is, I do think that we are it could be ugly, and is going to, I believe it's going to be ugly, but I do think that when Trump says that our best days and brightest days are ahead, I do believe that is a truism. So with that being said, guys, we need to respect, Steve needs to get out of here. So I'm going to say goodbye, and appreciate everybody tuning in today. And thank you for your time, and look forward to seeing you guys again soon. So take care, everybody. Have a fantastic afternoon.
Thank you, Steve. Thank you, Ghost. Thank you, Ron.
Thank you, everyone. God bless.